Okay, so several of you have had questions on completing the square. So here is some example of completing the square. Okay, so with completing the square, let's start out with a basic one. X squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. Okay. Now I realize this one could be factored, but we're going to use complete the square on it. Okay, so first things first, with complete the square, move the constant to the other side. Okay. Secondly, look at this number. This is our b. Remember, this is a, b, c in a quadratic equation. So take our b, and what we want to do is we want to add b divided by 2 squared to both sides. So this would be 4 divided by 2 squared to both sides, or 2 squared, which is 4. Alright, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Now, go ahead and simplify, and what I have here is factoring this would be x plus 2 squared equals 1. Now, factoring this. This is a perfect square trinomial here. That's what we call that. So if you have trouble factoring this, let's say it's a fraction or something. Now you could factor that one very easily. But if you have trouble with that, well, it's always going to be no matter what the variable is, it could be x or y, whatever. X, and then you get your number from here. If this, whatever b divided by 2 is, b divided by 2 will be this value here. Now, if it's a negative 2, that would have been a minus 2. But this particular b divided by 2 was positive 2, so we have a plus 2. Hope that makes sense. Now, at this point, we're in the square root property. So take the square root of both sides. This will allow us to undo the square here. So the square root and the square cancel each other out. And the square root of 1 is plus or minus 1. So, at this point, we're solving for x. So subtract 2 from both sides. Now, when you subtract 2 from this other side, just put it on the front here. It's not adding a negative 2 and subtracting 2 are the same thing. And so that's basically what we did, is add a negative. The reason we do this is so you don't make a careless mistake in our next step, okay? Which would be to take this and break it apart, because now we have 2 answers. Okay, the plus and the minus version. So this will be negative 1, and this would be minus 3. Okay, negative 1, minus 3. And so this would be the 2 answers for our quadratic equation on this particular one, negative 1, minus 3. Now, not all of them will you be able to break apart. If it was a negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2, well, the square root of 2 is going to be a decimal number, so just leave it as the square root of 2, and you can write it as negative 2 plus the square root of 2 and negative 2 minus the square root of 2. And MyLabs Plus will require you to type it in like that, okay? So, but this is how you break it apart when you have integers like we did here at the end. So let's step it up a notch and look at this one. Let's look at 2x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Well, the first things first, divide everything in here by 2. Now, we didn't have this step on the last one because we didn't have a 2 in front of our x squared. anytime you have a number other than 1 in front of the x squared, what we have to do is divide by that number, okay? Anytime this number here is something other than the understood 1, we have to divide by that number so that we get the understood 1 in front of the x squared. That is our goal, is to have that understood 1. It allows us to make this a perfect square trinomial, and it allows us to factor it much easier, okay? So at this point, just like we did on the last equation, add the constant to both sides, or move the constant to the other side, excuse me. Excuse me. In this case, it would be adding it to both sides. So this is x squared plus 3 over 2x equals 1/2. Alright, this is our b again. So it's 3/2 divided by 2 squared. Now that confuses people with that fraction divided by 2. A lot of people like to write this as 3/2 times 1/2. Remember, dividing by that number is the same thing as dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal of 2, which is 1/2. So these are one and the same. People just for some reason respond better when it's written in this form. Alright, so this is 3/4 squared, which is 9/16. So add 9/16 to both sides. Now this is where the little trick with the factoring is going to come in handy, like I showed you on the last problem. What is b divided by 2? Well, b divided by 2 is 3/4. So what we can do is we can say that this is x plus 3/4. That is a easy way to factor that perfect square trinomial. Now the right hand side, this is a little different because we've got to get a common denominator here. And the common denominator is of course going to be 16. And so 2 times 8 gave us 16, so 1 times 8 gives us 8. So this is 17 over 16. Okay, so take the square root of both sides, and that's going to leave us with x plus 3/4 equals plus or minus the square root of 17 over 4. Square root of 16 is 4, the square root of 17 we can't do, so we leave it like that. So subtract your 3/4 from both sides like we did on the last problem, and this is going to give me a negative 3 over 4 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 4. Now MyLabs Plus is going to make you write this as negative 3/4 plus the square root of 17 over 4 and negative 3/4 minus the square root of 17 over 4. Keep that in mind. The only other kind of these problems that we could do is if that were say this were a negative 17, this would be an imaginary I here, okay, to take care of that negative number. That would be the only other way we could do this problem, okay, so keep that in mind. Hopefully this helps you. If not, please come by my office and see me. I'll be glad to sit down with you and show you in person.